Single dad Janitor was asked to restart a broken computer. What he uncovered exposed a $5 million scam. "Just unplug it, Janitor. That's all you're good for, right?" The voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the tension in the room like a scalpel. Polite laughter bubbled up from the small crowd of young executives clustered near the corner table, half-empty coffee cups in hand. Ethan Sloan didn't flinch. He was already crouched beneath the conference table, one hand gripping the frayed power cable, the other steadying the overheating docking station. The air under there was stale and hot, the smell of plastic and burnt dust faint but familiar. He didn't need to look up to know who had said it. Brent Ryerson, Assistant Director of Operations 29. Gelled, hair-crisp suit and a career built on knowing who to mock when his ideas ran out. "You want this presentation to crash halfway through the secretary's briefing," Ethan said calmly. "By all means, pull the plug yourself." Brent blinked. The smirk faltered just enough to make room for discomfort. Ethan stood slow and steady, his knees cracking as he straightened to full height. He wasn't tall, but there was something in his posture that made people instinctively step back, a stillness honed from too many nights under too many emergency lights. "I didn't think you could talk," Brent muttered. "I didn't think you could listen," Ethan replied. Claire Renard, the new CEO, stepped into the room at that exact moment, holding a tablet. The room straightened literally. Brent looked away. Ethan said nothing. Claire's eyes scanned the room, then landed on him. "You fixed it?" She asked, no smile, no warmth, just business. "I did more than that," Ethan replied quietly. "But you should check your presentation drive. Someone's been rerouting files through a mirrored archive that doesn't belong to this system." Claire's brow tightened. "Is that a threat?" "It's a warning." Before she could answer, her assistant leaned in to whisper something. She nodded, brushing past Ethan like he didn't exist. He watched her walk away, then bent to gather his tools. That's when he saw it. A fragment of code flashing on the auxiliary screen only for a second before the main presentation loaded. But it was enough. Echo 9.4.1, init delay, .mirror, port 447-1. He froze. That was his code. His. He hadn't seen it in nearly a decade, buried deep in a ghost protocol meant to detect false metadata transmissions in unmanned surveillance software. It was never supposed to be reused, especially not here. Not in a conference room at Lyratech, a company supposedly building AI solutions for next-generation education. He tapped the console. A few keystrokes quiet smooth. Just enough to download a session log before the system locked. As he slipped the USB drive into his pocket, Lucy's voice echoed in his mind, "Why do you always keep quiet when people are mean?" Because the ones who shout, he'd told her once, usually don't know how to listen to silence. By 7:04 p.m., the office had emptied. Ethan moved like a shadow gliding through hallways with a mop in one hand and a purpose no one noticed. He entered the server access room. Not the main one, the auxiliary closet tucked behind the kitchen disguised as an old janitor's closet. He keyed in the code. The door clicked. Inside, blinking lights glowed against the metallic hum of a backup array. He sat down at the console, plugged in the drive, and opened the logs. There it was again, 447-1. Echo mirror, argus.edu, SIM transfer data packets looping every 4 hours. Masked as simulation testing for AI curriculum beta 2.3. But the recipient wasn't an internal server. It was off-site, Switzerland. His jaw tightened. He didn't say a word. Instead, he copied the full log, compressed it, and wrote one line in his old encryption protocol before saving. This loop was never meant to reopen. He powered it all down, one finger hovering for a moment before cutting the light. Back at the apartment, Lucy was curled up on the couch, wrapped in her NASA blanket, a bowl of cereal in her lap, and a half-solved Rubik's Cube in her hands. "You're late," she mumbled without looking up. "I brought pizza," he offered, holding up a box like a peace treaty. She tilted her head. "Mushroom." He nodded. She gave a thumbs up and kept twisting the cube. "You say anything today, you'll regret tomorrow." He sat beside her, loosened his boots. Just fixed something that wasn't broken the way they thought. That's not an answer. Ethan smiled faintly. No, it's not. She looked up. You okay? I'm fine. You always say that when you're not. He paused. Then in a lower voice, have you ever seen something come back from your past, like something you were sure was gone forever? Lucy blinked, like when I found Mom's necklace in the laundry and thought it was magic. Ethan nodded slowly. Yeah, like that. She stared at him, then tilted her head. Is it good magic? Or the bad kind I don't know yet? She leaned into his shoulder. Well, if it's bad, just unplug it. He smiled. If only it worked like that. That night, as he drifted to sleep on the worn-down couch, the line of code blinked behind his eyelids like a heartbeat. Echo, C 9.4. And somewhere in the back of his mind, the loop began to close again whether he was ready for it or not. Ethan stood at the sink the next morning, hands deep in soapy water scrubbing Lucy's lunch container. The cheap plastic lid had warped from too many microwave cycles, but he scrubbed anyway. Some rituals weren't about results. They were about rhythm. Behind him, Lucy was tying her shoes at the door, humming the theme from Interstellar under her breath. You ever wonder if AI can hum? She asked suddenly. Ethan smiled. AI can mimic. Humming still belongs to us. She looked over her shoulder. That's why you don't like what they build. He paused, rinsing the container. I don't dislike it. I just don't trust what's built by people who forget what it means to be human. She squinted. That sounds like something you'd say when you're about to do something important. He dried his hands. Maybe I already did. Lucy's backpack zipped shut with a satisfied snap. She pulled the front door open. See you after class, Dad. Be kind. Stay curious, he replied. She grinned. Loop never closes. He blinked. Where'd you hear that? You mumbled it in your sleep last night. And then she was gone. Back at Lyra Tech, Ethan moved like wallpaper, visible only if someone cared to look closely. Most didn't. By 10:03 a.m., the executive floor had cleared out for a fire drill. He entered the data operations wing, clipboard in hand, high-vis vest zipped halfway. Nobody questioned a man with a mop and confidence. Inside server room 2, the console blinked idly. He didn't need long. Ethan logged into the offline terminal using credentials from a forgotten maintenance profile still active in the registry sysmirror SHU JNT 212, a relic from the building's pre-merger days. He ran a script. 5 seconds later, 3 directories lit up: edu, beta transfer, metatest, sim, and a hidden folder titled Argus Archive. Ethan clicked. Lines of code unfurled like a spider's web. At the heart of it was a data stream set to ping every 4 hours. It wasn't routing through Lyra Tech's secured cloud, but rather through a masked node in Delaware, then to an address tagged Argus Foundation. The final destination. A server in Zurich. Encrypted, obfuscated, but not invisible. Not to someone who once designed code to spot lies buried in structure. He copied the data, compressed it, burned it into a hardware key the size of a paperclip. Then he deleted the log of his access. As he exited the room, a voice caught him off guard. You missed a spot. Ethan turned. Claire Renard was standing there, arms folded. Her heels clicked softly as she walked toward him. I know a fake cleanup routine when I see one, she said. Ethan didn't speak. Claire stopped a few feet from him. I checked the logs after yesterday. That mirrored IP you mentioned, it's not in any of the system backups. That's because the backup is the lie, Ethan replied. It's not logging what's real. It's logging what someone wants you to believe is real. She narrowed her eyes. And who would that be? Ethan met her gaze. Who gave me access clearance in the first place? Her expression shifted. Just slightly. Enough. Miles. Exactly. Claire straightened. You're accusing the CTO of embezzlement. I'm not accusing anyone, Ethan said. I'm telling you someone's using Lyratech's education demo as a front. The system isn't sending simulated learning data. It's pushing fake invoice transactions masked as AI training logs. She stared at him. You were never just a janitor, were you? I clean messes, Ethan replied, voice steady. Some just take more than a mop. An hour later, Claire sat at her desk staring at the frozen screen in front of her. She'd plugged Ethan's data key into a standalone terminal, no network access. Just raw files. She wasn't a coder, but she knew corruption when she saw pattern-matching logs masking multiple transfers, repetitive vendor names, invoice numbers just a digit apart, timestamps duplicated across different servers. Then she saw it, vendor ID 4471, Argus DE 324. Total paid $1,225 at $1,000 description, beta curriculum audit support, virtual platform only. But the signature on the approval line, Claire Renard. Only, she'd never signed that file. Her heart pounded. Someone had replicated her digital signature. The system had approved it automatically. She leaned back stunned, and in that moment she realized Ethan hadn't just fixed a glitch. He'd exposed a ghost. That evening, as rain ticked against the glass of her office window, Claire scrolled through old internal memos. Miles had started spearheading the EDU AI platform 2 years ago. He'd convinced the board the tech would revolutionize personalized learning. They'd won multiple grants, including the $5 million Department of Education pilot. And yet, the AI itself had no working demo. It was always under development, always delayed. Claire picked up her phone. She hesitated. Then she called Ethan. He picked up on the second ring. I need to see everything she said, skipping pleasantries. All of it. There was a pause. Then, meet me in the basement. Janitor's break room. She blinked. That's not a real. It is, Ethan said, just not in your floor plan. 15 minutes later, Claire followed him through a maintenance hallway she didn't know existed. Past boiler rooms, storage closets, and exposed conduits humming with forgotten power. He opened a metal door. Inside, a small space with a folding chair, a desk made from a door balanced on crates, a corkboard with notes pinned by paperclips and a flickering fluorescent light that gave everything a blue cast. Claire stepped in, unsure whether to laugh or be impressed. You built a war room. No, Ethan said. I built a mirror. He handed her a thick manila folder. This is the paper trail no one digitized. The invoice logs before Miles consolidated systems, before he started controlling the narrative. Claire flipped through it. Handwritten notes, annotated receipts, real vendors with real names. Then, sudden gaps, pages where transactions stopped making sense. You kept all this? I started noticing irregularities 5 months ago. I didn't speak up. Why not? Ethan looked at her, voice quiet. Because last time I spoke up, someone died. Claire froze. Your wife. He didn't answer, just looked down. She closed the folder slowly. Ethan, she said, if this is true, we're sitting on a crime big enough to bury both of us. Then we'd better make sure we're not standing still when it hits, he said, because it's coming. She nodded once slowly. Then she whispered, they built a lie inside the code. Ethan's eyes met hers. And now we show them what truth looks like. Claire's heels echoed sharply down the corridor as she exited the break room. No, the war room, as Ethan had called it. The man was infuriating. Calm when she wanted rage. Precise when she wanted answers. But, most of all, he was right. And that was the part she hated the most. The folder in her hand weighed heavier than it should. It wasn't the paper. It was the knowledge. She reached the elevator and paused, catching her reflection in the glossy steel. Perfect suit. Perfect posture. Perfect facade. Her fingers tightened on the folder. If this is true, she whispered to herself, I've been signing ghosts. Back in her office, Claire laid out the evidence like a prosecutor prepping for trial. The screen glowed with line items, vendor trails, and invoice chains, but her attention was fixed on one document. an approval file marked with her name. Date stamped during a week she had been on sick leave after a minor surgery. She checked her calendar, confirmed her email logs. She had never opened that contract. And yet, it bore her digital signature, identical, undeniable, immaculate forgery. She picked up her phone, not to call Ethan this time, but Miles. He answered on the third ring, sounding slightly annoyed. "Claire, everything all right? I need to speak with you. Privately." A pause. Now, "Yes. Conference room 6? 10 minutes." She hung up and exhaled slow, deliberate like a diver before the plunge. Miles arrived 7 minutes late holding a tablet and a coffee he didn't bother offering. "You look tense," he said, settling into the leather chair at the end of the table. "That investor call wear you out." Claire slid the invoice folder across the table. Said nothing. Miles glanced at it, then at her. Smiled faintly. "Is this a quiz? Open it." He did. 1 page and the smile thinned. 2 pages later his face was unreadable. When he spoke, his tone was controlled. "Where did you get this?" "That's your first question," she asked, voice low. Not, "Is this real?" Not, "How long have you known?" Miles closed the folder carefully. "Claire, you're new to this side of the house. There's a rhythm here, things that don't need to be stirred. Explain to me how my signature ended up on a document I never saw." He shrugged almost casually. "System glitch. Happens more than you think. Auto-signature software can fill in missing data fields if the AI thinks you're the intended approver. Do not insult me." His expression darkened subtly. "You're in over your head," he said quietly. "You came from consulting, strategy, slide decks. But this," he tapped the folder, "this is the engine room. And you don't pull wires without knowing which ones start the fire." Claire leaned forward. "I've built strategy for DOJ cases. I've rebuilt billion-dollar corporations from the bones up. Don't mistake my polish for weakness, Miles." Miles smiled again, but this time it was colder. "Then let me give you some advice. Drop it. Because if this goes public, it won't be my name on the headline. It'll be yours." He stood, adjusted his tie, and added with just enough softness to sting, "People don't remember who built the system. They remember who failed to control it." And then he left. That night, Claire couldn't sleep. She sat on the edge of her bed in sweats, bare feet on hardwood, a glass of wine untouched on the nightstand. Her apartment overlooked the river, twinkling with the blur of reflections that never quite held still. Just like her thoughts. She pulled out her phone, scrolled through old photos. One stopped her. A snapshot from 3 years ago, her standing in front of a whiteboard, scribbles behind her colleagues around her. A campaign that had restructured a failing Midwest school district into a tech-enabled success story. Back then, she'd believed in systems, believed that structure saved people. Now, she stared at her own face in the photo, smiling, confident, certain. She didn't know yet, Claire whispered. She hadn't seen the cracks. A notification buzzed. "Ethan, check your email." I uploaded a side-channel trace log from the basement server. She opened it. A spreadsheet appeared. Thousands of lines. But one row was highlighted in red. Authorized admin login, 2:04 a.m. User, Sloan, E, access level 4, override. Claire froze. She called him immediately. Ethan picked up on the first ring. "I saw the file," she said. "It shows you accessed a level 4 override at 2:04 a.m. I didn't. But the system was rewritten." "To frame me," he interrupted. "Calm. Too calm. Miles controls the architecture. I found the tail end of a honeypot fake access logs planted weeks ago. The trigger activated the night I entered server room 2. Claire closed her eyes. "He's not just covering his tracks. He's setting you up to take the fall, which means we're out of time." There was silence. Then Claire spoke softer than before. "Why didn't you fight back when he suspended you last month?" Ethan hesitated. Then, because if I'd reacted, it would have looked like guilt. And Lucy. She needs to know her dad doesn't swing first. Claire's voice dropped. You were willing to be humiliated just to protect her. Ethan didn't reply. He didn't have to. She exhaled quietly. You know what I've learned about power, Ethan? He waited. It only survives as long as good people stay quiet. The next morning, Claire walked into the building like a storm dressed in silk. Eyes forward, shoulders set. Ethan trailed behind her wearing a button-down that still smelled faintly of bleach sleeves rolled to his elbows. Brent Ryerson saw them and blinked. Is he back? Claire didn't stop walking. Yes, she said, and this time he's not just restarting the computer, he's rebuilding the firewall. They stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, Ethan turned to her. Are you ready for what's coming? Claire met his eyes. I'm not here to survive it, Ethan. I'm here to end it. The elevator dinged. The war had officially begun. You're sure no one's watching this floor? Claire stood in front of a closet panel no wider than a vending machine, her hand hesitating over a recessed latch. Ethan gave a curt nod. I checked the security blind zones. This hallway's got a 30-second gap every 7 minutes. Claire raised an eyebrow. That seems convenient. He smiled. Some of us notice where the cameras don't look. The latch clicked open. Behind it, a narrow passage led into the building's ventilation maintenance corridor forgotten since before the renovation. Claire ducked inside. Ethan followed, closing the panel behind them with a muffled thud. Inside, the air was cool and smelled faintly of copper and dust. Overhead, thick aluminum ducts stretched like arteries. Wires dangled in soft loops from the beams. Every few feet, Ethan's flashlight caught a faint glint. A disconnected node, a hacked splitter, something that didn't belong. He reached a junction and pulled back a layer of insulation. There. Claire leaned in. In the hollow space behind the duct's curve, someone had installed a slim black box. No markings, no serials, just a blinking green light. Claire whispered, "What is it?" Ethan's jaw clenched. A signal diverter. It reroutes outgoing packets to a shadow relay. In English. It's how they sent internal files without triggering network flags. It doesn't touch the system. It listens just outside of it. Claire let out a breath like she'd been holding it for years. Miles built a ghost channel. No, Ethan said eyes dark. Miles used one. Someone else built it. Years ago, before either of us stepped in. She looked at him. You're not just talking about this building, are you? He shook his head. This isn't a leak, it's a design. Later that night, they sat in the janitor's break room. No coffee, no warmth. Just 2 people, 2 chairs, and the flicker of a single fluorescent light that hummed like a lie that wouldn't shut up. Ethan spread blueprints across the table. Floor plans, duct maps, data flow diagrams that hadn't seen daylight in over a decade. Claire stared at them. Why haven't you brought this to the board? Ethan looked up. Because they wouldn't believe a janitor. She frowned. You think it's a class thing? No. He picked up a diagram and pointed to a section labeled Secure Archive Access. Reverend 7. His finger tapped a note scribbled in fading red ink. Confirm overwrite capacity. Auto-purge. EU 90 days. It's a control thing. He leaned back. People don't protect the truth. They protect the version of it that keeps them comfortable. Claire let that sink in. Then she asked the question that had been echoing in her mind all day. Why are you still here? Ethan, his eyes flickered, because the loop never closed. She shook her head. You keep saying that. What does it mean? He looked down, fingers tracing the blueprint like memory. My wife was a teacher. 5th grade. She believed in kids like they were gospel. She died 3 years ago. Claire's face softened, but she didn't speak. She caught a bug at school. Thought it was nothing. Sepsis. By the time we got to the hospital, he stopped, swallowed. There was a software glitch, a queue routing error in the intake system. Her file sat in triage for 2 hours. By the time someone noticed, she was gone. Claire whispered, "Ethan, I'm so..." He held up a hand. "I found the bug later. After. I traced it. It came from a subcontractor that used predictive AI to prioritize intakes based on demographic likelihood of severity." Claire blinked. "You mean it deprioritized her because she was young female and healthy on paper?" He looked her dead in the eyes. "She didn't die from infection. She died from someone's algorithm." The room was silent except for the hum of the light. Claire whispered, "That's why you took the janitor job. It was the only place that still used that same software line. I needed access, quiet access, and I needed time." A long pause. Then Claire said, "You've been tracking this for 3 years. I don't fix things for the paycheck. I fix them because if I don't, they stay broken." She looked at him, something shifting behind her eyes. "You know," she said slowly, "you're the first man I've met who could mop a floor and still dismantle a conspiracy." Ethan chuckled. "Don't flatter me. I've ruined more dinners than I've fixed bugs." Claire smiled. Genuinely. The first time in days. "You really want to end this, don't you?" she asked. "I don't care if they fire me. I don't care if they forget my name. I care that Lucy grows up in a world where systems serve people, not profit." Claire looked away for a beat, then turned back to him, voice low and firm. "Then let's close the loop." The next morning, Lucy waited outside school, her ponytail swaying as she sipped chocolate milk from a box. Ethan crouched beside her. "Hey," he said, "you remember that thing I said about being brave?" She nodded, serious. "Like telling the truth, even when it's hard." "Exactly." He tucked a small envelope into her backpack. "If anything happens if I don't pick you up today, give this to Mrs. Hammonds. She'll know what to do." Lucy's eyes widened. "Are you in trouble?" He kissed her forehead. "Only the kind that matters." She hugged him hard. "Close the loop, Dad." Ethan stood, watched her walk into school. Then he turned toward downtown. Toward the truth. In the sub-basement of Lyra Tech, Claire met him beside the archive port. "This is the last one," she said, holding up the key. Ethan took it, plugged it in. The screen came alive. Files spilled onto the drive. Transaction logs forged approvals, time-stamped edits by Miles's admin account. One folder was labeled Argus, Sheer Reconciliation, She Final. Claire narrowed her eyes. "What's in it?" Ethan opened it. Inside video footage, security cam logs. A recording from 2 weeks ago showed Miles in the server room manually overriding firewall settings. He stared at it. Claire whispered, "We have him." He nodded. "And now we bury the lie." The boardroom shimmered with a quiet kind of menace. Glass walls, polished wood, and 12 high-backed chairs that looked more like thrones than seats. Everyone inside had a title, a stake, or a fear they were pretending not to show. Claire adjusted her cufflinks and nodded at Ethan, who stood by the display monitor dressed in a plain white shirt and jeans. He looked completely out of place, which ironically made him the most dangerous man in the room. Miles was seated 3 chairs down. Calm. Crisp. His arms rested on the table like he owned the air. He didn't glance at Ethan. Not once. Claire cleared her throat. "Thank you all for being here on short notice. We have something critical to review." Brent Ryerson leaned back, clearly annoyed. "This better not be another security audit." Claire pressed a button. The screen lit up. A video began to play. Silent. Grainy. It showed a man, Miles, entering the restricted server room at 2:03 a.m. He looked around, tapped a code, plugged in a drive, paused, checked his watch, then overrode the firewall. The room didn't erupt. It froze, like the moment just before an earthquake hits. Claire's voice cut through the silence. This footage was pulled from an off-grid node inside the building's old duct system. It wasn't supposed to exist. Miles finally looked up. "Claire," he said, voice like velvet, dipped in warning. "You're basing accusations on a 20-second clip from a shadow system maintained by a janitor." Ethan stepped forward. "No," he said simply. "I'm basing them on metadata." He plugged in a drive, displayed a timeline of server activity login entries, packet behavior, and AI-altered invoice chains. Every document built toward one conclusion: a $5.2 million discrepancy, hidden through layer-stacked digital diversions, the line that connected them all Miles's credentials. Miles gave a soft chuckle. "Do you even understand what you're looking at?" Ethan replied. "I understand enough to know that when you forged Claire's approval while she was under general anesthesia, the system didn't delete the background cache, just rewrote the front-facing data." Claire folded her arms. "You didn't just exploit the system, Miles. You used me to do it." He stood then, slowly, like a king being asked to leave his court. His eyes swept the room. "Let's not pretend this is about morality," he said coolly. "It's about power. You want to take mine? Fine. But don't dress it in ethics." He looked at Claire. "I built this company's back-end while you were still writing mission statements for nonprofits." Claire didn't blink. "And I'll rebuild it without you. Cleaner, stronger, transparent." Miles looked at Ethan. "You think this makes you a hero?" Ethan held his gaze. Calm. Resolute. "No. Heroes save people. I just told the truth." Silence. Brent finally broke it. "Miles, we'll need to suspend you pending legal review." Miles scoffed. "Don't worry, Brent. I've already packed." He walked to the door, paused, turned back. "Careful who you trust, Claire," he said. "Sometimes the man who cleans your floor is just waiting to climb your ladder." Then he left. Later, in the quiet of the empty boardroom, Claire and Ethan remained. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was earned. "You didn't have to come today," Claire said softly. "You could have let me run the show." Ethan nodded. "But it wasn't your burden to carry alone." She looked at him. Really looked. For the first time she saw the man behind the mop, the one who carried grief like a second skin, who didn't ask for credit, just clarity. "You know, she said you've been invisible so long, people forgot you were watching." Ethan smiled faintly. "That's the advantage of being overlooked. You get to see what others hide." She hesitated, then walked to him, held out her hand. "Thank you," she said. He took it gently. "For your daughter," she added. His eyes flickered with something deeper. "For yours too," he said. That night, Ethan returned home to the quiet hum of the fridge and the soft creak of Lucy's bedroom door opening. She stood in her pajamas, holding her stuffed panda. "Did it work?" she asked, eyes wide. He knelt. "It worked," he said. "The bad code's gone. The good people stayed." She hugged him so tight it hurt, and he didn't want to let go. Meanwhile, in her apartment, Claire stood on her balcony, a glass of water in hand. Below, the city pulsed with a quiet kind of hope. Her phone buzzed. A message from Ethan. Loop closed. She typed back, loop reopened. For better things. Far below, beneath the city's hum, in a forgotten subnetwork where old systems quietly died or evolved, a new line of code began to write itself. Not for control, not for profit, but for protection, and for memory. Because sometimes the deepest scars don't scream. They listen, and they rewrite. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, revealing the sun-drenched lobby of Lyratech. For the first time in months, Ethan stepped out not with a mop or bucket, but with purpose in his stride and his shoulders square. Claire was waiting near the reception desk, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. "Black, no sugar," she said, handing him one. "Still remember." Ethan chuckled. "That's a dangerous skill. You might learn to understand me." She smiled. "I'm already halfway there." They walked side by side through the corridor, passing employees who now looked at Ethan with curious respect rather than the usual glassy indifference. A few even nodded. One whispered, "That's him," like he was some myth finally stepping out of the shadows. Claire led him to a conference room. On the frosted glass door, a temporary plaque read, "Ethan, Cross Systems Integrity Advisor." He stared at it. Claire nudged his shoulder. "It's not about the title. It's about what you do with it." He turned toward her. "I don't want to become them." "You won't," she said. "That's why I need you here, not to change you, but to make sure they don't change us." He stepped inside. The room was modest, still smelled like new paint. A clean desk, 2 chairs, and a corkboard with nothing pinned yet. It wasn't much, but it was his, and it was honest. Later that afternoon, Ethan stood in front of a classroom. Yes, an actual classroom. Claire had pushed the initiative. A mentorship series. Internal workshops to rebuild trust from the ground up. The audience was a mix of junior engineers, system admins, and a couple of sharp-eyed interns trying to hide how impressed they were. Ethan paced slowly, then stopped mid-room. "Everyone thinks firewalls are built to keep bad things out," he began. "But that's not true." He let the words hang. "They're built to control what gets in, and what gets seen." He turned, meeting their eyes. "Your job isn't to build perfect walls. It's to know what's behind them." A young woman in the back raised her hand. "How do you know when someone's hiding something?" Ethan smiled faintly. "You don't look for the noise. You look for the silence." Back at home, Lucy greeted him at the door with glitter on her hands and a paper crown on her head. "Dad, we made royal fortresses today. Mine has a firewall." She giggled at her own joke. He knelt down and kissed her forehead. "That's my girl." She beamed. "Can you help me build the gate? It needs to open for good people and stay closed for monsters." Ethan paused. That sentence, so innocent, carried more weight than she'd ever know. "I'll help you build a gate," he said softly. "One that knows the difference." That weekend, Claire invited them both to a quiet community park in the old district, a grassy field surrounded by food trucks and art tents. It was simple, but it felt real. Lucy tugged Ethan's sleeve. "Dad, she's here." Claire stood by a picnic blanket, a Tupperware container in hand. "I brought sandwiches," she said awkwardly. "And also, I may have baked cookies." "You bake?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "I YouTubed," she confessed. They laughed. Lucy tore into a peanut butter sandwich while Claire and Ethan sat under the shade of a maple tree. Claire glanced at him. "You know what scares me most." He looked at her. "That people will forget." "No," she said, "that we'll stop remembering why we started." Ethan nodded. "Systems forget. People do too, unless we build reminders." She looked down at her hands. "Maybe that's why I asked you to stay. You don't let things be forgotten." There was a beat of silence. Then Ethan said something he hadn't said in years. "You make the world quieter, Claire." She turned to him, eyes wide. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. "Everything's been noise. Noise in my head. Noise in the world. But when you're around, I can hear the things that matter." It wasn't a line. It wasn't romantic for the sake of being romantic. It was raw, honest. And it landed. Claire's eyes glistened just a little. "Ethan," she whispered, "you weren't just cleaning floors. You were clearing paths. I just didn't see it until now." That evening, Lucy sat on Ethan's lap as they watched the sun go down through their living room window. She yawned. "Dad. Are you happy now?" He looked at her, then at the tiny picture frame on the shelf, the one with his late wife smiling by the ocean. He didn't answer right away. "I'm becoming happy loose, and that's better than pretending I already was." At the same time, across town, Claire stood on her balcony, phone in hand. She was reading Ethan's internal report. It didn't list his name on the header, just a note at the bottom. "For those who listen deeper than the code." She closed the file and smiled. Not the smile of a CEO, but of someone who had felt something shift inside. Because sometimes the most powerful systems aren't built in server rooms or boardrooms. They're built in hearts, in classrooms, and in quiet parks where peanut butter sandwiches still taste like hope. It was 3:17 a.m. when Lucy shuffled into the living room, rubbing her eyes and clutching her panda bear Tofu by the ear. She had heard something. Not loud, not harsh, but a voice. Her dad's. From the other room. She tiptoed down the hallway and peeked through the slightly ajar door of Ethan's bedroom. He was asleep. But talking. Softly. Urgently. Miles. No, the Switzerland IP isn't clean. Route it through Tel Aviv. Don't leave a trail. She blinked. What did that mean? Her little brows furrowed. She whispered to Tofu Dad's dreaming about computer stuff. She turned to tiptoe away, but stopped. She looked back at her father. Even in sleep, his brow was tense. Whatever the dream was, it wasn't peaceful. The next morning, she drew it in crayon. A box labeled Switzerland IP with a scribbly arrow leading to a laptop. And below it, she wrote, "Don't leave a trail." Claire spotted the drawing 2 days later when she dropped by Ethan's apartment to bring Lucy a new set of watercolor pens. The three of them were sitting at the dining table, Lucy working on her Cyber Detectives art series, Ethan going over system reports, Claire sipping tea. Claire reached for a napkin and saw the drawing beneath it. She paused. Switzerland IP. Her eyes locked onto the phrase. "What's this?" she asked gently. Lucy looked up. "Oh, that's from Daddy's dream. He was talking about someone leaving a trail. It was secret, but I heard it." Ethan froze. Claire looked up, her voice calm but sharp as flint. "You talked in your sleep about a Switzerland IP." Ethan's voice came low. "Apparently." Switzerland. She repeated the word like it weighed something. She stood, pulled out her phone, and opened the finance logs Ethan had uncovered earlier. Her thumb flew over the screen. She pulled up the offshore transaction table. The one Ethan had flagged weeks ago but hadn't cracked the final destination of. There it was, a masked endpoint. swz.eos.solutions.age. Her breath caught. "It was Switzerland," she whispered. "You were right. Even in your sleep, your brain kept digging." Ethan rubbed his eyes. "I never closed the loop." Claire looked at him. "Then maybe it's time we do." The next few days unfolded like a quiet revolution. Ethan, Claire, and an internal compliance officer named Sheila went full dark mode off-grid from official servers, digging into archived nodes and pre-acquisition contracts. It wasn't easy. Everything had been layered, masked. But Ethan noticed something strange. A tiny pattern of API calls, each exactly 1.37 B2, pinged every Wednesday at 3:03 a.m. He ran a trace. The request originated not from external actors, but from Miles's old executive credentials. Still live, still active, and triggering deep reporting scripts hidden inside Lyratech's grant accounting system. "Someone's been running ghost scripts," Ethan said. Post-departure. He left a door open. Claire frowned, meaning Ethan looked up, meaning Miles isn't done. He left a fuse burning, and it's almost at the end. That evening, while Lucy painted spaceships in the corner of the room, Claire and Ethan sat shoulder to shoulder at his dining table, screens glowing between them. Claire stared at the real-time server logs. "Ethan," she whispered, "what happens if this isn't just about stolen funds?" He didn't answer right away. Then finally, "Then it means Miles built something more dangerous than a scam." Claire turned to him, like what Ethan exhaled slowly, a way back in. As the evening grew darker, Lucy climbed into her father's lap, curling into his chest. "Are you going to catch the ghost, Dad?" she asked sleepily. He kissed the top of her head. "I'm going to close the door. It keeps trying to come through." 2 nights later, just before dawn, Ethan received an encrypted notification from a honeypot node he had set up on a whim 2 months earlier. Intrusion detected. He opened the log. Someone had tried to override a buried contract timestamp. A digital fingerprint. Miles's. He was back, and he was trying to erase something permanent. Claire called an emergency board session that same afternoon. She didn't show them the full iceberg, just enough to tip them toward action. A vote was passed to authorize a full independent investigation of all offshore financial activity connected to the Miles-era server map. That vote gave her power. That power gave Ethan time. And Ethan had one last piece to follow. That night, Ethan stood outside an old storage closet in the basement of Lyra Tech, the same closet he used to mop around, key in hand. But this time, he wasn't here to clean. He was here to unlock what had been left behind. He opened the door. Inside, covered in dust, sat a backup drive Miles had hidden behind a fake wall panel. Ethan plugged it into a secure device, and there it was, a full blueprint, not just of financial manipulation, but of a complete digital double of Lyra Tech's internal system hosted remotely with Miles as the root admin. He built a shadow company, Ethan whispered. A ghost version. Ready to launch. Claire's voice came through the earpiece. Can we stop it? He stared at the screen, then smiled. We won't just stop it. We'll expose it in daylight. Somewhere in a quiet suburb, Miles poured himself a scotch and leaned back in his chair, eyes on the glowing lines of code across his monitor. He didn't know it yet, but someone had just closed the loop he thought would stay open forever. And this time, it wasn't about catching him. It was about ending him. The hearing room inside the State Corporate Commission building was colder than it needed to be. Stone walls, fluorescent lights, and the sterile quiet that only comes when everyone is holding their breath. Ethan sat in the back row, not in uniform, not in any official seat, just present. At the front, Claire stood facing the oversight panel, her voice steady but sharp enough to cut granite. This wasn't an oversight, she said. It was a structure built on deception, brick by brick, code by code. She tapped the printed audit trail. And we have the blueprint. A murmur rippled across the panel. Miles Rourke, seated at the defense table in a tailored charcoal suit, smirked like a man who had seen worse rooms and left them untouched. He leaned to whisper to his lawyer but glanced back directly at Ethan. Their eyes locked. For a moment, time seemed to pause. Two men, two paths, one truth. The proceedings began with a dry sequence of exhibits, IP addresses, metadata transaction trails, shell corporations across 3 continents. Most people in the room didn't understand the technical jargon, but they understood the story. Miles had used his tenure as CTO not just to embezzle but to embed a parallel infrastructure, a ghost company piggybacking off Lyra Tech's core systems. Every grant, every contract, every licensing deal mirrored and funneled through hidden ports. And he would have gotten away with it if someone hadn't been listening deeper than the logs. When it was Ethan's turn to testify, the panel chair adjusted her glasses. Mr. Cross, you were a janitor. Yes, ma'am. And how exactly did you uncover all this? Ethan looked toward Claire. Her nod was subtle but grounding. He stepped to the microphone. I wasn't looking for a scandal, he said. I was trying to fix a laptop and a piece of myself. The panel looked puzzled. Ethan continued. My wife died 5 years ago. Cancer. Fast and unfair. After that, I stopped building systems and started mopping floors. I didn't want to be a genius anymore. I just wanted to be there when my daughter got home from school. He paused. The room held its breath. But when I touched that broken laptop, something clicked. And it wasn't about the machine. It was about a loop, a logic loop that didn't belong. Someone left a thread dangling and I couldn't ignore it. He looked at Miles. You hid your betrayal inside beautiful code. That's what made it so dangerous. It wasn't sloppy, it was poetic. And that's why no one else saw it. But poetry doesn't make theft noble. It makes it harder to forgive. Silence. Even the air conditioning seemed to stop. The panel chair nodded slowly. Thank you, Mr. Cross. During a recess, Ethan stepped outside into the sunlight, needing to breathe. Claire joined him on the granite steps, coffee in hand. She handed him one without asking. 2 sugars, no cream. He took a sip. You always remember." She leaned against the railing. "How do you feel?" "Like I finally said goodbye to a ghost," he said quietly. Claire turned to face him. "You know, I read your report. Every line. But there was one sentence that I highlighted." Ethan arched a brow. "You wrote, 'A system only heals when it recognizes where it was wounded.'" He exhaled through his nose almost a smile. "Didn't think anyone would notice that part." "I did," she said, "because that's not just about code. That's about people." Back inside, the panel returned. The chair cleared her throat. "This commission finds sufficient evidence of willful fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and obstruction of internal audit processes. We are referring this matter to federal authorities for criminal investigation." Miles didn't flinch, but Ethan saw it, the tiny twitch in his jaw. One loop finally closed. As the room buzzed with aftershocks, Claire walked past Miles without a glance, but Ethan paused. He leaned slightly toward his old rival. "Miles," he said. The man turned slightly, still smirking. "Next time you bury a back door," Ethan said, voice low, "try not to dream about it." For the first time, the smirk vanished. Outside, the wind had picked up. Ethan and Claire walked together beneath a canopy of rust-colored trees. "What now?" she asked. "I go back to being a dad," he said. "That's always been the only role I wanted to get right." She stopped. "Ethan." He turned. Claire looked unsure for once. Guarded. "I spent my whole life trying to build something that would last," she said. "But maybe the thing I was building toward was someone to build with." He didn't answer right away. Just looked at her. "You're not a fortress, Claire. You're a lighthouse. And I think I'm ready to come home." She stepped closer. Neither spoke. But something was said. Between them. Beyond them. In the quiet that only comes when truth is finally louder than noise. That night, Lucy sat cross-legged on the living room floor playing with her paper robots. "Dad." "Yeah, Bug, did you catch the ghost?" Ethan looked up from the stove, smile curling gently. "We didn't catch it," he said. "We closed the door behind it." She nodded, like that made perfect sense. "Good. Ghosts don't belong in our house." "No," he said softly, "they don't." A week had passed since the hearing, but the weight of it hadn't lifted. Ethan stood alone on the rooftop of his building just after dusk, leaning against the cold steel railing. Below, the city breathed horns, footsteps, distant laughter. But up here it was quiet, reflective. He looked up at the stars' hands tucked in his jacket pockets. He didn't miss the boardroom, or the applause, or the headlines. But he missed something. The rhythm of building, the music of solving, the joy of being seen not for what he used to be, but for what he could still become. The door behind him creaked open. Claire stepped out, her heels soft on the concrete, a folder tucked under one arm. "You always find the quiet places," she said. He half smiled. "Quiet places don't ask for more than I have to give." She stood beside him, looking out at the same stars, then handed him the folder. He opened it. A contract. Not just any contract. A permanent role. Director of Strategic Integrity, Marchand Global X Lyra Tech. He looked at her stunned. "You're offering me a seat at the table." "No," she said gently. "I'm offering you a hand in shaping the whole table." He was silent for a long moment. "I'm not that guy anymore," he murmured. Claire's voice was soft, firm. "You're more than that guy now." He closed the folder. "I have Lucy. She needs my time, my energy." "She won't lose you," Claire replied. "She'll watch her dad build something honest in a world full of shortcuts. She'll see that it's possible to be kind and brilliant, gentle and strong." Ethan looked down, then up again. "You really believe I can do this?" "I believe," she said, "because I saw you walk through fire and never burn anyone to get through it. That hit deep. You made the hardest choices for the right reasons. That's what leaders do." He didn't answer, but he didn't say no. Later that week, Ethan and Lucy walked hand in hand through the city's tech museum. It had been her idea. She wanted to see the room of old computers, as she called it. They paused at an exhibit showing an early firewall mainframe. "Daddy, is this what you fixed?" "Not quite," he chuckled, "but it's what fixed me." She tilted her head. "Huh." He crouched beside her. "I used to build things that protected systems, but then I forgot how to protect people, especially myself." She leaned her forehead against his. "You protect me." He smiled. "Every day." They walked on, stopping at an interactive panel. One screen showed a quote etched in light. "The strongest codes are written not in silence but in clarity." Lucy pointed. "That's a smart quote." He nodded. "Yeah, it is." Back at their apartment, Ethan found a small envelope taped to their door. It was from Claire. Inside, 2 tickets to a chamber music concert and a handwritten note. "Let's find our rhythm again. Saturday at 7. C." He stared at the tickets. A part of him felt undeserving. Another part remembered the sound of her voice when she wasn't being CEO. The warmth of it. Saturday evening, Ethan stood in front of the mirror adjusting the collar of his blazer. Lucy peeked in from the hallway, a mischievous grin on her face. "You look like a movie star." "I look like someone trying too hard," he laughed. "Nope. You look like someone who's about to dance." He raised an eyebrow. "We're going to a concert, not a prom." Still, she shrugged. "Music makes people move." He knelt down and hugged her. "You've got more wisdom in you than most grown-ups." She kissed his cheek. "That's because I've got the best dad." The concert hall was grand but intimate, dark mahogany walls, warm lighting, and soft strings tuning in the background. Claire was already there, wearing a midnight blue dress and a quiet smile that somehow made the air between them hum. "You came," she whispered. "I wanted to hear how truth sounds in 4-part harmony," he replied, eyes twinkling. She laughed, light real. They sat side by side. As the quartet began to play, Ethan closed his eyes. Each note seemed to stitch something inside him back together. He turned to Claire halfway through the second piece. "You know," he said softly when I was fixing that laptop, "I wasn't trying to change anything. I was just trying not to break anything more." "But sometimes," she replied, "you have to break the silence to restore the whole song." He looked at her. She held his gaze. No pretense. No shield. Just 2 people who had walked through the wreckage of trust carrying their own scars, and still chose to sit together in the quiet. After the show, they stepped outside. Rain was just beginning to fall soft and cold. Ethan looked up. "You'd think I'd hate the rain. It ruined my best shoes once." Claire smiled, but it also washed away a few bad ideas. They stood under the awning, neither moving. "Claire," he began, "I don't know if I'm ready to fall in love again, but I know I don't want to stand alone anymore." She didn't hesitate. "Then don't." They didn't kiss. Not yet. But they stood closer, shoulders barely touching, breaths sinking like 2 lines of code finally aligned. 6 months later. The morning light poured into the new Marchand Global X Lyratech offices in Midtown, sleek glass warm wood and open spaces designed not for control, but for connection. The elevator dinged. Ethan stepped out wearing a soft navy blazer, dark jeans, and sneakers that had clearly been cleaned, but not for show. In one hand, he carried a worn leather satchel. In the other, a small lunchbox decorated with robot stickers. "Daddy, don't forget my sandwich has to stay cold," Lucy's voice echoed from his memory as he glanced at it, smiling. He walked past the glass doors with his name on them. Ethan Cross, Strategic Culture Liaison, Marchand Global X Lyratech. It still didn't feel real. Not because he didn't believe in second chances, but because he never expected to be asked to lead one. Inside, the floor was buzzing with quiet focus. No dress codes, no corner offices. Just people and space and light. At a side desk, Lucy sat cross-legged in a reading nook, whispering Arabic words from a flashcard set. "Salam," she said, mouthing the pronunciation carefully. "Peace," came a voice behind her. She turned to see Claire now in a simple blouse and slacks holding a mug of cocoa with extra marshmallows. "For you," she smiled. Lucy beamed. "Thank you, Miss Claire." Claire sat beside her. "You know, Lucy, some people think peace comes from silence, but your dad taught me that real peace comes from truth." Lucy blinked. "Truth," Claire nodded. "Even when it's hard. Even when it's messy. Truth lets people breathe." Just then, the main conference room door opened. Ethan stepped in. The long table was surrounded by a dozen global partners, diverse, powerful, some skeptical. But no one wore a suit. No one led with rank. He walked to the center, placed his satchel on the table, and pulled out a single item, the faulty motherboard from that long-forgotten laptop. He held it up. This, he said, was never just broken. It was hiding something. The room leaned in. And so were we. Behind titles, protocols, and carefully phrased memos, we were hiding our fear. Fear of mistakes, fear of whistleblowers, fear of speaking up. He paused, then placed the motherboard gently on the table. "This company will be built on one thing: the courage to not be perfect, to catch the flaw before it becomes a failure." A partner from Dubai raised his hand. "And what do you call this culture?" "Mr. Cross," Ethan smiled. "I call it unfinished." Murmurs. Intrigue. He continued, "Because the best systems stay open to questions, to feedback, to change. We're not building a castle. We're building a bridge." Claire leaned against the doorway, arms folded, pride softening her face. She whispered to herself, "That's the man I hired. That's the man I—" She didn't finish the sentence, but she felt it. That night, back at their apartment, Lucy brushed her teeth while Ethan reheated leftover pasta. From the living room, she called out, "Daddy." "Yeah," Miss Claire said, "you make people feel brave." He stopped, smiled. Did she now? She said, "Brave doesn't mean no fear. It means fear and love win together." Ethan dried his hands and walked to her room, crouching beside her. "You know what I think," he said. "What I think love is what makes us strong enough to face what scares us." Lucy leaned into his chest. "And that's why I'm not scared of the dark anymore," she whispered. Saturday morning. Ethan stood in a community center gymnasium helping a group of teenagers learn basic coding logic through games. He watched as two boys high-fived after solving a puzzle together. "You don't need a fancy degree," he said to the group. "Just curiosity and the willingness to fail out loud." A woman clapped slowly from the doorway. Claire, in jeans, coffee in hand, laughter in her eyes. "You're turning tech into poetry again," she teased. He walked toward her, wiping his hands on a rag. "I figured out why I love this job," he said. "Tell me." "Because every bug I fix in their code, I fix something in myself." Claire stepped closer. "And every wall you break down, let someone else walk through without fear." They stood in the middle of the room. Children buzzed around them. Hope buzzed louder. He reached for her hand. "Claire Hale," he said softly. "I don't have a script. I don't have a plan. I just know that when you're near me, I remember who I'm supposed to be. Not the guy who used to build systems. The man who builds a life." She didn't hesitate. "Then let's build it. Together." As the sun set that evening, Ethan, Claire, and Lucy sat on the rooftop of their building, watching the sky melt into hues of gold and lavender. Lucy pointed upward. "That one looks like a bunny." Claire laughed. "That one looks like your dad's old laptop." Ethan mock groaned. "I'm never living that down, am I?" "Nope," they said in unison. He wrapped his arms around them both, and for the first time in a long time the loop in his heart wasn't broken. It was closed, gently, fully, forever. It was a quiet Sunday morning, not the kind of quiet that echoes with emptiness, but the kind that hums with peace, the kind that follows storms, courtrooms, betrayal, forgiveness, and healing. Ethan Cross stood in front of a group of teenagers in a sunlit workshop at the downtown community center. On the wall behind him was a banner that read, "Fix forward where second chances build first dreams." The kids weren't dressed in uniforms. Neither was he. And that was the point. He pointed to the whiteboard where a single line of code blinked. "Anyone know what this means?" he asked, smiling. One girl raised her hand. "It's a loop. But it's still open." Ethan nodded. "Right. In tech, an open loop keeps running endlessly until something tells it to stop. That's useful until it isn't. Until it starts draining the system." He tapped the marker against the board. "In life, open loops are the things we don't finish. The apologies we never give. The truths we bury. The hurt we ignore. They don't go away. They run quietly, draining us." A stillness filled the room. He looked around. No one moved. But when we face them, when we close the loop, we don't just stop the damage. We restore the flow. Someone clapped at the back. It was Claire, wearing jeans, holding a coffee in one hand and Lucy's small hand in the other. Ethan grinned. "Perfect timing. Class, meet the two smartest humans I know." Lucy waved proudly. "Hi, I'm Lucy. My dad fixes broken stuff," Claire added with a wink, "and builds what's never been built before." Later that afternoon, Ethan stood in the Marshawn Lyra Tech headquarters once again, not to fix anything, just to say something that had waited too long. He had called a small meeting. No suits, no slides, just truth. He stood before the team programmers, interns, HR managers, even security staff. They had come because they respected him. But more than that, they trusted him. 6 months ago, I walked into this company wearing a janitor's badge, he said, voice steady. I wasn't hiding who I was, but I was hiding what I feared I had lost. He looked at Claire in the front row. But it turns out purpose doesn't disappear when a title does, and dignity isn't handed down. It's lived, one decision at a time. A young analyst raised his hand. "And if we mess up," Ethan smiled, "then you own it, learn from it, and walk forward. That's how the best code is written in iterations. Just like people. Applause. Quiet at first, then full." As they left the room, Lucy ran to him holding up a sketchbook. "Daddy." "Look." He flipped it open. It was a drawing of their apartment rooftop, the three of them sitting under the stars. She'd even drawn the city lights and a small cat they didn't actually own. But what caught his breath was what she'd written beneath it. "Home is where the loop ends." His eyes misted. He looked at Claire, and without hesitation pulled her close. That evening, the three of them walked through the neighborhood fair. Lanterns glowed on strings overhead. Music floated through the air, soft and nostalgic. Cotton candy in Lucy's hands, a gentle breeze in Claire's hair. At one point, Ethan paused as a street musician began playing a soft acoustic version of "What a Wonderful World." Claire turned to him. "You okay?" He nodded. "Just remembering who I used to be, and who I never thought I'd be again." She reached for his hand. "You're not the same man I met in the server room." He raised an eyebrow. "Is that a good thing?" "It's the best thing," she said, "because the man I met was cleaning up after other people's mistakes. The man I love builds something no one else dares to." He leaned in. "Do you really mean that?" She smiled. "Ethan, I don't say things I don't mean. That's how loops stay open." He kissed her, not the kiss of two people unsure, but of two who had found in each other what neither had dared to hope for. Back home, after Lucy had fallen asleep, they stood on the balcony watching the city shimmer. Claire leaned into him. "Do you ever wish it had all happened differently?" she asked. He was quiet for a beat. Then, "No, because then I wouldn't have met you as me." She looked up. "And who's that?" "The man who's not afraid to start again. Or love again." She rested her head on his shoulder, and together they watched the lights fade into a quiet, sleeping city. Some people build empires with power. Some build trust with silence, and sometimes the smartest person in the room is the one who used to clean it. Sometimes the people we overlook are the ones holding the world together in silence. If this story moved you even just a little, take a moment. Reflect on the quiet heroes in your life. Maybe it's a parent, a teacher, a janitor, or maybe it's you. Now I'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country. In the comments I read every one of them. And if this story touched your heart, consider subscribing to the channel. It's completely free, and it helps us bring more human heartfelt stories like this to the world. Thank you so much for watching. Your time, your presence, it means more than words can say. Until the next story, take care of yourself, and remember, the smallest act of kindness can close the biggest loop.